Welcome to my live talk. My name is Edmar. This live talk is all about exploring entrepreneurship and the leadership mindset. So today, I am talking with Ahmed Khan, property expert, speaker, and a property trainer. Ahmed graduated from university in 2016, but was rejected for over 30 jobs. He decided to do his own thing, and today we have the man behind £2 million property portfolio. Ahmed, how are you today?
I'm very well. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so how's your day been?
Yeah, not bad. I think yeah. I think everyone's days are slightly different with the lockdown situation. You can't really leave the house, so you try to get as much done as possible by staying in the house. So, I mean, for me, that's not too much of an issue because I can do things on my laptop. But you don't really you can't really have these meetings and stuff. So maybe before lockdown we would have met up somewhere at a hotel and recorded this together or something. Whereas now it's sort of on a live stream and so on and so on. Or maybe it would be at an event or something. But other than that, it's pretty much normal, so not too much of an issue.
Okay. Well, that's good. Good to know that you're good. Thanks for coming to my podcast. This
My absolute
podcast is all
pleasure.
this podcast is all about exploring leadership and the entrepreneurship mindset. So you come as a great entrepreneur and also leader, because in business you needed to be a good leader to lead yourself and the lead other people, investment idea to make great business. So one thing that called me about yourself is that you are 25 years old, very young, and you built £2 million property portfolio, and you had a rejection for over 30 jobs, which is a lot of them because I'm just about to leave my university, and I
Mm.
see myself going to apply for some job.
What
Then
did you
maybe
study?
cybersecurity.
Okay,
Mhm.
so you know how you have spring weeks, you have summer internships, you have grad schemes, like there's like a whole bunch of different stuff. I think
Yeah.
collectively it was over 30, maybe 33, 34 or something across 3 years. And I never got a single one. I forget jobs. I couldn't get an internship, let alone a job. So, and actually, what I found was I wasn't very good at the interview stage. That's something I wasn't very good at. So I know we're doing an interview today, but that's something I never did too well. So let's see how we go.
Okay, well, and I already did an intern for 8 months in very good
Okay.
place, but COVID closed, so there was no response back. But let's see
Okay.
how many job I got. I will get off, then I will come and we'll do great competition to see who had more and who had less.
Well,
No,
I'm on zero, so I'm sure if you've had one, you're ahead of me now. So, yeah.
yes, so maybe one thing I have to learn from you today is build myself in terms of property investment. So as I was saying, before we jump into property, I've got some question to ask you.
Yeah, please.
Then just help us to get to know a little bit more about you before we dive into a property investment. So usually our first question is, how do you define success, and if you consider yourself successful?
I think you should define success by how good you are at something. It doesn't, and not really look at the money part of it. I think you should define it as well. How skilled am I? If there's some sort of spectrum from 0 to 10, am I 0 being not so good and 10 being the best in that industry? I think that's how you should look at success rather than how much money you can make. Because I think the problem is when you start looking at money, that doesn't necessarily define success. Because for example, let's just look at I'm always more inspired by artists, um, athletes, as opposed to entrepreneurs. For example, when I was in university in my first year, I had a whole bunch of posters everywhere of different people, but none of them, thinking back now, I didn't really think of this at the time, but none of them were entrepreneurs. They were all artists or athletes because, they take success to a new level, and they sort of, I'm not saying they do it by themselves, but of course, at the end of the day, if you're an artist, no one can sort of do it for you, or if you're an athlete, no one can play football for you or sort of play basketball for you. And I think if you look at some of the greatest, right? So I'm a huge Michael Jackson fan. To me, possibly the greatest artist of all time. He didn't. I don't know how much money he made, but he wasn't, close to the richest people on earth, or close to some of the entrepreneurs who made a real amount of money. Maybe he touched 1 billion, maybe he didn't. Some of the best athletes in the world, they're not necessarily billionaires. I mean, there's only a couple who are billionaire: Tiger Woods, Ronaldo, but they're still the best at what they do. So I think people should look at success as, well, how good am I at something, not necessarily how much money I can make. Because people can make more money than Ronaldo, but it doesn't mean they're better than Ronaldo like for like in their field. It's just they're in a more lucrative field and they're going to get a higher monetary result. To me, that doesn't mean you're more successful. I think success is, in your field, how good are you compared to everyone else? And that's how you should look at success, rather than, well, I made this much money. Because at the end of the day, for example, you have minority countries which aren't that developed. They don't necessarily make the most money, but there's a lot of talent. There's a lot of successful people, but they're not the richest. So I don't think looking at money is a good way of looking at success. I think you should look at how skilled you are, how good you are at something.
Okay. Well, thanks for your definition. And so far, for what you have done, do you consider yourself as a successful?
I don't think so. I think I started a few years ago. I've been lucky with some stuff, and some things have gone my way again from a monetary point of view. But I don't think I'm successful in the sense that I've achieved some huge things, or I've made some breakthroughs. In the sense that, okay, I did a lot of public speaking, and I got to sort of go to some different places like Dublin and Wales, and I spoke throughout the UK and so on and so on. So I guess it's a good result, but I can't say I'm one of the best public speakers or something. I've done well, but I really define success as how good you are in that field. And I think to become amazing at a particular field, you can't do that in 1 year or 2 years. You have to spend 5 years, 10 years, 15 years to become the best. I think I've had very, very good starts in a lot of fields, property, speaking, but I can't say I've made it, or those sort of things. So as of right now, I would say I'm making progress. I'm sort of getting better, but I don't want. I wouldn't compare myself to someone who's done it for 5, 10 years, if that makes sense.
Okay. Well, it does. It is. It's your point of view. So today, the program is all about exploring and learning from entrepreneurship and leadership, or businessmen, whoever is making and doing well. So we can learn from both sides and see how it can fit to us. And
well, because at the end of the day, property itself is a very, very lucrative industry. It's like you don't necessarily have to be amazing at property in order to make good money from property, right? So that's just the nature of that industry, that if you understand some fundamentals, if you put in a bit of work, you will make money from it. Whereas someone else could be much, much better at their craft, they might not make as much money because the industry isn't as lucrative. So that's why I define success in that weird sort of way, and I don't think I'm quote unquote successful in that regard. I've made a bit of money, but I think it's a start.
okay, so for you, it is just the beginning. Then you're still
Yeah.
moving. Maybe in or 10 years, when we build our program to become a TV station, then we will have you back. So you will be like sharing with us maybe the stage you got in 5 years. So that's my invitation is right now for you. Now maybe in 10 years I will bring you back. So let's move.
And then we might have a different answer for sure.
So let's now move to maybe your education, to see how you move from a university to property. So you said you went to university. Can you talk to us about which university, what course you did?
I went to UCL, University College London, which is in it's in Tottenham Court Road, Euston, around King's Cross. That's where it's located. So this is not in central London, by the way. And I did economics. I studied economics for 3 years. It was pure economics. It wasn't economics with something, economics with maths or anything. It was just pure economics for 3 years. That's what I did.
Mm-hmm. So then you are well known because you made a lot of application, but you did not get a job. So just to get an idea, maybe like myself or someone leaving university and they're going to make application.
Mm-hmm.
So do you know what was the issue? Was it because you weren't good enough, or your grade, or you just you don't know what happened?
So, as you will know with these internships, what happens is if you get rejected, they never give you feedback purely because so many people apply. They can't do individual feedback. So at the end of the day, you're either in or you're either out. There isn't a case of you didn't make it because of this, because they don't have the capacity to reply to hundreds of people or thousands of people. So the answer is I don't know. Grades wasn't never really an issue because I was always one of those people who I always try to find a way to like hack the exam system, right? Like I wasn't necessarily like the smartest, but I think there's ways of doing exams. There's like techniques for exams. So exams for me was always fine from that point of view because I always found like the same patterns. It's the same questions every time for a while for a lot of stuff. So by finding patterns and just working out ways, I was always okay with exams. I think my interview style wasn't very good. I couldn't answer a lot of questions. When, for example, there's a typical interview question like, what are your strengths? It's like I hated that question. It's like to me that was a bit of a weird question. It was a bit cringe, It's like you're trying to sit there and talk like, I did this, I did that. It's a bit of a weird question. So I couldn't really do any of those type of questions, and I think maybe it was interview stuff because I did get a lot of interviews. It's just I never got past the interview, so my applications were fine, because it's like 50% of the time I did get to the interview stage. I just couldn't get past the interview stage, or I would get to the assessment center, which is like when you come up, everyone gets together for like a day and you do like exercises and group exercises. Again, I got to maybe 5 of those. Again, I couldn't do those. Uh, so yeah, I don't really know, but I guess the interviews I couldn't do since that's where I failed the most, as opposed to the application. If you don't have grades, you don't get to the interview stage, right? Because it's kind of like a funnel, right? So you go one step at a time. So if the grades were an issue, I would never get the interview, but I did. I just couldn't do the interviews, I think.
Okay. Well, maybe that's many student reality when you just maybe you don't just fit to what they're looking for, then they don't give you a place. But with you, you made a difference, which is fantastic for me. That's another point that I like about your journey, because many people they could just be maybe go down to a different path or sitting at home complaining, crying about life. But you didn't get a job, then you started your own thing, which I like the idea because I'm more about doing my own thing. I like doing my own thing because I feel that that's who I am. I feel I'm expressing myself. I'm kind of artist. I'm creating my own stuff. So I like creating things with my hand. I like coding. I like developing. So that's what I like. So why property? You could go to like cryptocurrency or doing whatever business. So why did you choose property?
How did I get into property? Well, when I was in university, this is my last year of university. We had a house development happening, i.e., the house I live in. We were having like an extension done, and I was sort of very, very involved with that project in terms of architects and so on and so on. And I thought that was pretty good. Finished university, I had a couple of ideas. Property wasn't necessarily the first thing I went into, by the way. I had an idea for an app, which didn't quite work. I had another idea which didn't quite work. I gave property a go and it started working and I built a bit of momentum. So I think what I found looking back now is I like the idea of entrepreneurship. I'm not necessarily too fast as to what the business is, in the sense that I just like the idea of business, like, trying to build something from a business point of view. I don't care if it's like, selling a product or if it's selling a service or a property. I just like entrepreneurship, if that makes sense. Like I'm not too fussed about, well, I have to sell this service or I have to sell this product, because there isn't one particular thing which I'm interested in. Like for example, let's say someone's really, really into tech. Well, then naturally, if you were an entrepreneur, you would end up becoming a tech entrepreneur because you like tech. I'm not really like that from that point of view. I just like entrepreneurship, not necessarily I like tech in entrepreneurship or I like services in entrepreneurship. So it's just, whatever business idea sort of worked, I kind of went with. I just like the concept of business overall.
Mm-hmm.
And the process of building, I think that's something a lot of people have, which is it's like a challenge and you want to build and once it sort of like plateaus, you kind of get a bit bored of that thing. So I think entrepreneurship has a lot of challenges, and I think there's a lot of people who just like the idea of entrepreneurship, not necessarily one particular thing. because a lot of people get confused with this whole passion thing, right? Because it's like, well, what exactly am I passionate about, or what exactly do I like? But I think it's, if you think about it, I think a lot of people are just passionate about entrepreneurship, not necessarily a subset of entrepreneurship. Like, you can give them any type of business, they will enjoy building the business. It doesn't have to be a tech business, or it doesn't have to be a food business, you know?
Yes,
If
yes,
you're
yes.
if you love food and you want to do your own thing, well, then it's pretty easy. You start a restaurant or like some sort of food business. But like I said, I wasn't really into one particular thing, which I was like, then I will make a business out of this.
Okay, yes, 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 yes. I do understand. I do understand. And I met some people like that. They
Okay.
don't like, they don't have a single focus. They just want to do it. So they spread, like, they kind of like, they spread their wings, and whatever comes, they catch, which is good for you. You got a property, and it is doing well,
Well,
which is good.
I would say, like, I'm not a huge fan of doing too much at the same time, but I think the point I was trying to get across was that the one thing I'm doing, or the couple of things I'm doing at one particular stage, at one particular time, I'm not too fussed as to what they are. Like, they could be any type of business, and I would be fine with it. But I think the problem is when you try to do too much at the same time, you might be able to compartmentalize your time. You might be able to say, well, if I do 3 hours here, 4 hours here, 1 hour here, 1 hour after lunch, I think you can compartmentalize your time. The problem is that, like, just in terms of your mind space, now you're thinking of four things, like, and you're always thinking of four things, and that's very, very hard to do. Like, whereas if you just focus on one, it's much, much easier. So I think people try to compartmentalize time, and they say, well, I can do four things because I've got enough time. But I think what they underestimate is how much, like, the mental focus sort of goes into it. And if you're trying to focus on four things, that's very hard to do. Like,
Yes,
I
yes,
mean,
yes.
that's very, very hard to do.
Yes, and
So you really got
myself,
to stick to one.
yes, I do have this kind of approach, because once I tried to do too many things at the same time, and I wasn't good in none of them. I had some idea, but I wasn't like, the focus and the quality was not the
Yeah.
same. Now I'm focusing in two, three, which is when I get
Okay.
good at this, then I start developing, I start moving to another area, which
Yeah,
is
then you
good.
can move on to something else. Yeah, for sure. But I think starting from too many at the same time is just too hard. I think it's very,
Hmm.
very hard.
Yes.
I mean, if you can do it, great, but it's hard.
Yeah. So now that's why you got into property, and for many people to start in property, one of the
Yes.
biggest challenge is money to put down for the property. It is money and the knowledge, but for many people they have a knowledge, but they don't have money. So how did you raise money to start into property?
Well, I think kind of like anything, a lot of things have moved on. So property previously used to be the fact that you had to have a lot of money in order to get started, because you would have to go buy something and make money from the thing you bought. But it's no different to websites 5 years ago, 10 years ago. If you wanted a website, you got to pay like 3 grand just to get a website made, right? Whereas nowadays you can get a website for £10 per month or something. So everything has become cheaper from that point of view, because different things have come available. So now, from a property point of view, yeah, that's what it used to be, which was you need 50 grand, you need 100 grand, 70 grand, whatever the figure is. But when I started with this, let's just call it a strategy or a business model, whatever you want to call it. Basically, I was renting properties. So I wasn't buying anything. I was renting something for like £700 a month, £800 a month, which is not a lot of money. Most people have £700, £800 extra per month. And then I was turning them into almost like Airbnb type of properties, right? So I would rent something for long term for 3 years, £700 a month, and then I was putting it back onto stuff like Airbnb for about £1,700 a month, and making like 1,000 difference in the middle. Now those are not exact numbers because you have bills and so on, but you get the gist of it. Which is, the analogy I give is, it's like you look at something like Uber, right? Now, Uber makes money from taxis, but they don't own any taxis. They simply control the taxis. They don't own them. And with property, you can actually do the same thing, which is you can make money from property without necessarily owning it. You can control it. And that's essentially what I did, well, I still do now for a good 3 years, which is basically controlling property and then turning that into something else, i.e., this whole Airbnb type of stuff. It's not just Airbnb, but that's sort of the simplest way of explaining it. So you don't necessarily need a lot of money to start in property. You need 2,000, 3,000 pounds around that sort of mark, and you can get going. And once you start making money, you can sort of build up from there. So I think they're just new models now. Like, you couldn't do this 10 years ago. There was no Airbnb, there was no systems, there was no tech which was out there in order to do this. Whereas now you can run the whole operation on your iPhone. You got systems, you got apps, you got Airbnb, you got so much of that. And that's what I recommend to people who basically are looking to start in property but don't have a lot of money. That's the best way to start.
Okay,
Not
okay.
hardly any money required.
Mm-hmm. So that's a good strategy, and it looks like the cheapest strategy to start because you said like 3,000-4,000 pounds should be enough. That's my experience. Moving to my one of my service accommodation, it was around the price. So then comparing to when I bought my first property, which I paid like 16,000 pounds for deposit, with second one, which is the first one, I paid more money and it gives me less return. And the
Yeah.
second one, I paid less amount and they give me more return. So I
Is
believe,
it is the second one a service accommodation?
yes, it used to be service
Okay,
accommodation.
fine.
Hmm.
Makes sense.
And
By the way, for the people who don't know, service accommodation kind of just means Airbnb.
yeah. So then this question. You said now everything is easier than what it used to be before, which I see it is true. But when it comes to property business, with this challenge because of the COVID-19 and the economic challenge, is this still the best and a good time to start in property?
For service accommodation or just property as a whole?
For service accommodation.
Okay, so for service accommodation, it really, really depends on which area you're in. I mean, some areas I would say definitely not, and in other areas they seem to be fine. Like throughout the country, they seem to be okay. What I'm finding is big cities, city centers are hit a lot worse than the smaller outskirts. People don't mind as much going to the smaller outskirts, whereas you look at something like central London and that got hit pretty bad, purely because people don't want to take the underground, people don't want to take the buses, so on and so on. So I think starting service accommodation right now is not a problem. It's just I would be very, very careful about the location. I mean, normally I would say, get going. It's the fastest way of making cash flow. But right now you've got to be a bit more careful because obviously the tourism industry and the travel industry took a bit of a hit. So right now it's still possible, but you've got to be extra careful and you've got to avoid some areas like central London, kind of for the time being. In 1 month time or 2 months time, it might be back to normal. We don't know. But as of right now, I would say big cities have taken more of a hit than smaller towns and cities for sure. Like for sure, that's the data's there. It's taking a hit.
Okay. Yes. So if you're looking to start in the property, the advice from he knows what he's talking about. He has built a massive portfolio. So then start looking into
There's other,
location.
there's other things you can do in property. Like for example, I'm still making offers. I'm still trying to buy more properties, because there's a good it's a good time for that. But what I personally wouldn't do is the necessarily the Airbnb stuff. There's other things you can do in terms of you can buy something and you can, for example, we bought a lot of 1 bedroom properties which we turned into 2 bedroom properties. So that's something you can do. But the Airbnb stuff I will be careful about. I feel like we lost the
Okay.
host. Did we lose
No,
you
no,
there?
I'm back. I don't know if you can see me. I just gave you the full
Oh,
screen because Mhm.
yeah, I
I
thought we
just gave you
lost
the
you or
full
something.
screen. Yeah, no, I'm still here. So
Okay.
then it is the time is still good, but you have to maybe apply more knowledge or do a little bit of more research to know
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, it's not necessarily the best time for sure because of course there's restrictions. So I think anyone saying this is an amazing time to do it, I don't think that's right. And I have seen some people claim that it's fine, it's perfectly normal. I don't agree with that, but I think in a few months it will be fine, and I think in some areas it is still fine because that's what we are seeing. But in the big cities, it's not fine. So you really got to be careful. Or I would look to do a strategy which sort of builds your portfolio, but that's if you have a bit more money or if you know people who have a bit more money.
So talking about strategy to build your portfolio or having money, it comes down as a building a good relationship to start your JV partner. So then let's say someone watching our interview and they wants to start into property or get themselves ready for when market go to the point where they feel they can start. but they don't have enough cash. Then they want to get themselves with joint venture partner. So how, based on your experience, how to build a good relationship to start a joint venture partner?
Well, how to start the process of getting a joint venture partner? Is that a question?
Yes, yes, yes. Hmm.
So I, I think especially in property, there's different things you can do, right? I would always I would always try to, if you're going to do a joint venture partnership with someone you haven't worked with before, I would try to do the smallest, easiest project that you can possibly do, right? Don't go big, don't go complicated, don't throw a whole bunch of money at it. I would do something small or something which is easy to do or something which is going to be relatively quick. Maybe you buy and sell something. That's the best way because by working with someone only then can you really find out what someone is like and if there's challenges, how do they react to the challenges, so on and so on. I know before that in person everyone can be fine and so on and so on, but I think a lot of times it's like when you have the challenges, do you really find out can you actually get along with people and so on and so on. So I think really the best way is a lot, I personally like to think I can get a feel for a lot of people and I sort of go with my gut feel initially, and then after that I would say the second best thing you can do is do something small, do something easy, and just test it out. That's the best way, right? Because I mean, unfortunately, you can't exactly give them a questionnaire to do and they fill it out, and someone's good and someone's bad. You kind of just have to roll with it. So that's what I would say. I think I think you got to run with it, and ideally run with something small and something simple. And if that goes well, then you can go bigger.
Okay, okay, okay. So that's a good advice for anyone who's looking to do into property. And now let's just look a little bit into a property scenario when it comes to do a self accommodation. So if I have to look or if I have to view a property or a unit for self accommodation, what are the points that I should be considering before or when I'm at the property?
What should you be considering at the property when you're trying to get a deal?
Hmm.
I think even before you get to the property, uh, most of the stuff is already done. I mean, if I'm looking at a property, I'm only really looking at it because of the condition and just the surrounding area. I'm not really looking at it from the point of like evaluation that is this a good deal or is this a bad deal. I think most of that's done on the computer or the laptop and stuff even before you even get to the viewing. So, for example, the most basic tip, the easiest tip I can give you is if you are in an area and there's a lot of hotels, then that's a good sign because if there's a lot of hotels, that means people are coming in for short-term stays, and if they're coming in for short-term stays, then if you have an Airbnb or something, you're likely to get bookings because there's hotels. If there's no hotels at all, it kind of sends a signal, well, there's not that many people coming for short-term stays, otherwise there would be hotels in the place. So not it's a rule of thumb. I'm not saying every single time, but generally that's the case. So you look at hotels in the area. I think another strategy you can do is, if anyone listening on the call, what you can do is, if you have a spare room in your house, or even your house, actually, this either one works, but you've got to be a bit more careful with it. I think Airbnb starts blocking accounts, but if you're not doing service accommodation Airbnb, it doesn't really matter anyway. I mean, it doesn't matter if they block you if you're not doing it. But what I would say is, put your house on Airbnb, take some good quality pictures, put your house on Airbnb, see what happens. People have done that in the past. They ended up getting like 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 pound bookings on their house, and then they started debating, well, do I go on holiday or do I like cancel the booking? But yeah, that's one way of finding out if it's going to work in your area or not, which is just stick your house on Airbnb and see if you get any inquiries. Make sure, if you're going to do that, by the way, make sure it's on inquiry only mode, not instant booking, because then someone's going to book your house. But on inquiry only, all they can do is send you an inquiry. And then, of course, if it's your house, then you just cancel the inquiry, and you don't get penalized or anything, or there's no real issues. But yeah, that's one way of finding out, which is basically just stick your house on Airbnb, see what happens. Takes 10
Okay,
minutes.
okay.
Good quality
Mm-hmm.
pictures might take you half an hour. Making an account 10 minutes. Within 1 hour you could be done. Within a few days you can get like I don't know, £1,000 booking, £2,000 booking. I don't know.
Okay,
It's one
okay,
way of
okay,
testing for
okay.
sure.
Mm-hmm. So you said maybe the best way to start is to start looking the area if there is a lot of hotel being there. So that's the first thing to check. So our next question is, then that's what you have to be looking for. And what are some of the mistakes you have to be prepared to avoid when starting this in service accommodation?
Well, I think the biggest mistake is the area itself. Really, I mean, it's kind of like to give you an example, McDonald's has the best brand, one of the best brands in the world. McDonald's has the best systems in the world. McDonald's has training operations and manuals and processes and hygiene, and McDonald's basically ticks every single box there is, right? It's like technically it's like the biggest restaurant or fast food chain in the world easily. So, but if McDonald's has all of that, but if McDonald's is in an area, by the way, where I live around here, there was a McDonald's which closed down because the town the McDonald's was in is primarily only old people, and a lot of old people don't eat McDonald's, so therefore it was a bad area, right? You can have the best systems, the best marketing, the best branding in the world, but if you're in a bad area, none of that matters because, well, there's no one coming. So the same with service accommodation. Yeah, the systems are important, the marketing's important, all those things are important. But at the end of the day, if your area is bad, none of that's going to help you. But if your area is good, your systems might not be the best, your marketing might not be the best, your customer service might not be the best, but because the area is so good, there's so many people coming that you'll be fine. And then you sort of just improve those things. Biggest mistake, which is the wrong area, because after that everything's downhill from there. It doesn't matter how many systems you put in or marketing you put in, nothing's going to help. So I think the McDonald's analogy works pretty well in the sense that they're the best in the world. Yet even if they are in a wrong area, it doesn't matter. There's no one coming. You know.
Okay. Yes, yes, yes. So it's good analogy, and we have. I hope you listening to us and you apply the same analogy and the strategy to your business because it does not only
And I think that
apply.
applies in any area. Yeah,
Mhm.
exactly. I think that applies to whatever business you're in. You could be a gym. There was another gym. There was where I live. There was a gym which opened up, and what the gym was basically aimed at muscle heads, right? Like it was aimed at huge people. Like literally, you had to be like a tank in order to basically get into this gym. And there was like you walk into the gym. There's a huge like dragon and stuff. There's an MMA ring. It was basically a gym for like people who were huge, right? Now within a few months, they realized, well, hold on a second, there's not that many huge people in this place. And second, normal people now don't come to this gym because they're intimidated by all the huge people. So very, very quickly, they had to change all their branding. They had to get rid of that stupid dragon and stuff. They had to change, like, it was called pumped, i.e. like pumped, right? There was no
Mhm.
there was no cardio. Cardio didn't exist. So it had like two treadmills, but it had like the best weights equipment I've ever seen. It had machines for every single muscle group there is. I've never seen anything like it. But they didn't realize that there's actually not that many people who are huge and require all of that. Most people want a treadmill, a cross trainer, a rower. So they had the area completely wrong. If that was in central London, I think it would do well because there's a lot of people there. Or there's a lot of maybe big people who like that type of stuff. But in a small town, there's not that many big people. Very very quickly they have to sort of like change all of that for that reason. So I think again the area works pretty well.
Mhm. Yes, yes, yes. So another secret is make sure you provide the right service to the right customer and in the right area. So if you join us, we are talking to Ahmed. He is a property developer, a young man, 25 years old, had some issue getting job, and he decided to create his own thing. So today we are learning from him, his business journey, mindset, and how maybe one of us can apply the same strategy, or we can learn to build ourselves. So now you teach us a lot of information you do, but one thing I notice is that many people, when they are doing one business, they always associate another type of cash flow to the business. So this is the same thing with you. So you doing a self accommodation, your property development. And now I see you a speaker and a trainer. So why speaker and the trainer, and what kind of training do you provide?
So I started speaking maybe just over 2 years ago, around that sort of mark. I was basically making a lot of social media content. I was doing stuff like this, and people said to me, do you want to speak at my event, so on and so on. So I started speaking at different events, and I used to speak for a company, Progressive Property. Some people have probably have heard of it. So I used to speak for them essentially, and I used to go around different places, different places in England, or like, like I said, I went to Dublin a few times, Wales, and so on and so on. And I used to do a lot of speaking for them, or I used to do a lot of speaking myself, just sharing content. So that's essentially what I've done for the last couple of years. In terms of the training stuff, I'm not really set up like a training company. If you go to my social media, Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, wherever, you'll never find a post saying I've got a training day coming up, or I'm offering training, or I've got mentoring. I do training when every now and then people approach me saying, do you do training? Do you do mentoring? So I do some one-to-one stuff there, but I don't have a training company per se, in the sense that there isn't like events and so on and so on. I sort of just I spend most of my time actually doing the property stuff, and then every now and then when someone wants to do something, I have products which I can sort of offer them. But that's really it. You'll never see any advertisement. You'll never see any posts. You'll never see any marketing for the training side of it, because I only mainly I do one-to-one training, so it takes up a lot of time, and I can't really do more than 5 people at one go anyway. So and that to me always seems to be the case. So yeah, I mean, I do a bit of it, but not that much.
Okay, so we are about to finish our live talk interview podcast today, and I do have 2 questions left over for you. They will be very quick. This question is: now you have a portfolio of £2 million, yeah, property portfolio. So how do you see yourself now and before the portfolio, comparing to before the portfolio? And the second part of the question is, how is this challenge affecting your business?
The challenge being COVID.
Yes.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, to answer the first question, how is it any different? I think maybe more confidence from that point of view, because I think in anything the hardest is the first one. Like the first client, the first customer, the first product, the first whatever. I think the first one's always the hardest, because you think, well, is it going to work? Is it not going to work? So once you do it a few times, you don't really have the same confidence issue. You kind of, well, know it's going to work. Now it's a case of, well, how do we keep doing more of it? So I think that's really the only thing which has changed from before and after. That I'm kind of like, well, okay, if it got to 2 million, then why can't I get to 4 and 6 and 8? So that's that's the only thing I would say. I don't think it's made too much of a difference. Yeah, I mean it's made money, but I'm saying it's not made too much of a difference in my life from that point of view, if that makes sense. And in terms of the second question was, how's COVID made a difference? Well, everything has been a bit slow. I mean, in terms of buying stuff, everything's been slow. There hasn't been much coming onto the market. Financially, luckily, touch wood, we've sort of been okay, because we still haven't gone into a loss. I mean, most of the properties we had, they're still cash flowing. Some, like I said, especially the London ones, they're not cash flowing as well. They lost a bit of money, but most of the other ones made enough money to cover those ones. So across the whole thing, and I think that's, I think just being lucky to some extent. Good marketing, but I think luck does play a bit of a part here. So yeah, I think if you're in the travel industry and you're not making a loss, I kind of see that as a bit of a win right now, because the travel industry is pretty much hammered. So I think that's what it's essentially been. I'm just sort of like, kind of grateful that it hasn't lost a lot of money. It's sort of just been above positive for most of it. So I can't really complain too much in an industry where a lot of people have lost, a lot of money basically. And again, that's part of it's just chance. So that's what I would say. It's been not the best, but also not the worst. So I'm kind of in the middle.
Okay. So the final question is our last question is, what's your advice for anyone who wants to start into a property business, especially using the strategy you just talk about, self-accommodation? What's your advice for them?
My advice for property as a whole, because property as a whole can get a bit confusing because there's so many different things you can do. I think you really need to spend some time thinking about, well, what exactly do I want? Am I trying to build a long-term portfolio? Am I trying to replace my job income? Am I trying to get out of a 9-to-5 job? What exactly am I trying to achieve as my first thing, right? Like, for example, if I said in 12 months time, where do I want to be? You really got to work that out, because then you can work out a strategy which fits that and sort of make it work. Whereas sometimes what happens is people aren't really sure what they want. Like, they're a bit confused about what they want, and because of that confusion, they end up doing the wrong stuff. So I think the more clarity you have about exactly what you're trying to achieve, then you can sort of work backwards and work out, well, if I did this or if I did that, then I'll get there in 12 months' time. To give you a very good example, is like when I was renting properties in order to turn them into Airbnb and stuff. I only did that because I didn't have a job, so therefore I was like, well, it's the fastest way of replacing an income. But maybe if you're 60 and you have an income, you have a pension. Sorry. Let's go back a step. Let's say you're 40 or something, right? And maybe you have income coming in. Maybe you don't necessarily want income. Maybe you want something for your pension in 30 years' time. So you want to start building your portfolio, i.e., buying stuff. So I don't think there's a best strategy or a good strategy or a bad strategy. I think they're just designed for different things, and you really got to work out what exactly you're trying to achieve. Because otherwise, what happens is you you start getting in circles, and you kind of like get nowhere because you're going in circles. You know.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Yes,
what I would
yes,
say.
yes.
You got to get you got to get clarity on that situation for sure.
Okay. Well, if you watch us, if you're watching us, one thing I want to leave you with is that when you join the property, be clear with what you want. Maybe you want to build a massive portfolio, or you just want something to give you extra income. So when you have your strategy, then you know what will work for you. But as my guest said in the beginning, property is very profitable business. If you know what you're doing, then you should be okay with that. If you don't know what you're doing, there's always way to know. Maybe book, training, or mentorship. He offer mentorship and training. Maybe that's opportunity for you to get with him and learn from him to find out. So that's the end of our live talk interview. Thanks for coming. Thanks for sharing with us.
Thank
And
you for
I
having me.
hope, as I said in the beginning, in maybe in 5 or 10 years' time, we will bring you to share with us how 10 years from now, COVID-19 and that your business did not let you down.
Yeah, that'd be great. Hopefully, we'll catch up in 10 years.
Thanks for your time, and I hope you continue having a good day. Okay.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.